Bula Vinaka, everybody. This is Dave here at Vinaka Urban Farm. It's a drizzly October day outside. It really feels like we're getting into fall right now, so it's not a very good day for doing much outside farming, so I figured it might be a good day for storytelling. So today, in this video, I want to tell you the story about the name of the farm, Vinaka Urban Farm, and the farm's connection to Fiji. It's a story that means a lot to me, and hopefully it'll be interesting to plenty of you. So you can see I'm dressed for the occasion. And if you've seen me at the market stand, you'll probably see me in shirts like this, tropical looking shirts, and skirts like this. Ooh, showing a little leg there. I won't often be carrying this around unless things change at the market and I'm pretty desperate for some new marketing material, but this is part of the Fiji story. So the reason I wear these outfits and the reason that the farm's name is Vinaka Urban Farm all has to do with the country of Fiji, an island country out in the South Pacific. So why? Why am I connected to Fiji? It's not just a random obsession. Fiji's where I learned to farm, actually. So so I have a special connection to Fiji, and farming in particular is connected to Fiji for me. So here goes. Here's the story. It actually begins not in Fiji, but in another country across the Pacific, in South Korea, where I taught English for a few years. So when I was in my late 20s, I taught English in South Korea for a few years, and I managed to save up some money while I was there. And my plan was, once I got a little bit homesick and was done teaching, is that I was going to backpack all the way around the world, going east, so the opposite way from the opposite way than the Pacific Ocean, to get all the way around back to the United States and back home. And I was originally going to start in New Zealand. And so I saved up my money, I bought my ticket to New Zealand, and I was gonna buy a camper van on the northern tip of New Zealand and drive all the way down the country for a couple months, and then fly out to the South Pacific, which was gonna be my next destination. But when I got to the airport, I was refused entry to New Zealand because I didn't have an exit ticket. And I guess New Zealand has a problem with people who say they're just tourists and they show up and they don't leave the country. But and for that reason, they need people to have an exit ticket. But I hadn't bought my exit ticket. I was just going to do that when I got to New Zealand. And so after pleading, begging, and being upset with the person at the ticket station at the Seoul International Airport, I just couldn't get into New Zealand. So I lost all that money for the ticket, and I was thinking to myself, how can I regroup? And I just decided to skip New Zealand, and I found a cheap ticket to Fiji a week later and just hung out in a hostel in Seoul for a week, and then started my my trip around the world, supposed backpacking trip around the world in Fiji. And on my way to Fiji, I had a layover in the Hong Kong International Airport. So I flew from Seoul to Hong Kong, and then I had a little layover at the airport. And I've always found that when I've done a lot of traveling, and whenever I go somewhere, I try to learn just a little bit of the language because it means a lot to people. Even if you really suck at their language, if you just try to say stuff in their language. So while I was in the Hong Kong airport, I was brushing up on my basic Fijian, trying to learn the numbers and basic expressions and stuff. And I sat next to a guy who was Skyping his parents or something, and I was just sitting there muttering to myself, trying to like get my numbers correct and being like, oh, yeah, bula, 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 that's hello, and Vinaka, that means thank you. Spoiler alert. And the guy got done Skyping, and I was just sitting there muttering to myself, and he was like, oh, hey, are you learning Fijian? And I said, yeah, that's what I'm doing. He's like, good. It'll really help you out to know a little bit of the language when you're there. And so we just chatted a little bit, and then we got to board the plane and said goodbye forever, or so we thought. But it turned out that when we got to Fiji, I accidentally stole this guy's cab to the hostel that we just both happened to have booked also. So my first name is Jonathan, his name is John, and I thought the cab was for me or the ride to the hostel, and it wasn't. And we figured this all out when he finally got to the hostel as I was sitting in the waiting room at the hostel, and we reconnected there, and this guy named John, he said, well, hey, I've been to Fiji before, and when I was here before, I got kind of lost on a nearby road, and a guy helped me out, and he was a really good guy, so I was hoping that he still lived in the same place, and that I'm going to walk down this road in a couple hours once I get my stuff settled in my room, and do you want to come with me? I'll introduce you to him if I can find him. And I thought, yeah, like what? I'd much rather do that. That sounds like a really interesting way to go about starting to explore the country. And so I went with him, and John and I walked up the road. It's probably about a mile up the little access road to the hostel that we were staying at. And we found the guy that John had that had helped John out several years ago when John had been in Fiji the first time. And the guy's name was Junior. And so we sat down and talked with Junior for a second, and Junior finally, he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you. Yeah, you got cheated by that cab driver, and I helped you get back to the hostel." And John was like, "Yeah, thanks a lot for that." And Fiji said, "No problem," and John said, "No," or Junior said, "No problem, man. You know what? Why don't you come back later tonight and have some kava with me, and we'll all hang out and just have some kava together." And kava is a traditional Fijian drink. It's like a very, 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 very mild narcotic that is made of ground up dried roots. It tastes like mud. It's awful. It makes your stomach hurt. But it's just it's a social beverage, kind of like I don't know, beer or something for Fijians and a lot of people in the South Pacific. So we both got invited, and we both said yes, and we both went back later that evening and just sat around drinking kava all night and talking to Junior. And it was such a great time. It was awesome, just a sincere connection. Junior just seemed like a great guy. And so he was like, "Hey, why don't you come back tomorrow and hang out?" And we were both like, "Yeah, let's totally do that." And so John, when he had been to Fiji previously, Fiji is not just one island. There's a main island, and then there's a bunch of tiny island chains. It's something like 333 total islands make up Fiji. And John had been there before, and he knew some people on an outer island. So after that second day, John was like, "Look, I gotta go to this outer island, but I'll connect back with you, Junior, whenever I come back." And so John went out to hang out on that with the people he knew on the outer island. But Junior and I had hit it off, and so Junior was like, "Hey, why don't you can come back as often as you want.